Never would have made it.
The church has been talking about this new lady for weeks. Nobody knew exactly where she came from. Some people said she had just returned from overseas after expanding her business empire across different countries. Others claimed she was one of the richest women in the nation, a billionaire whose companies employed thousands of people. Nobody could confirm which story was true because she never spoke about herself. But everyone agreed on one thing. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Her beauty wasn't loud or flashy. It wasn't the kind that demanded attention with expensive jewelry or revealing outfits. It was the kind that made people pause for a second look without even realizing they had stopped walking. She carried herself with quiet confidence, greeted everyone with a gentle smile, and sat through every service without saying more than a few words. Before long, she became the center of almost every conversation after church. The young men couldn't stop talking about her. Some suddenly became more regular in church, hoping to catch another glimpse of her. Others found excuses to walk past her after every service, praying she would notice them. Even some of the older women admired how calm and respectful she seemed despite the rumors surrounding her wealth. Daniel never joined those conversations. At 19 years old, he had different priorities. He was more concerned about choir rehearsals, Bible study, and helping his widowed mother than chasing women. To him, she was simply another church member. Nothing more. Nothing less. He had never spoken to her. Not even once. Every Wednesday evening, after the midweek service, Daniel stayed behind with the rest of the choir to rehearse for Sunday worship. Long after most members had gone home, the sound of singing still echoed through the sanctuary as they practiced song after song until the choir director was satisfied. That Wednesday was no different. The rehearsal stretched late into the evening. One by one, the choir members packed their bags, exchanged goodbyes, and headed home. Daniel stayed behind for a few extra minutes, arranging microphones, neatly stacking music stands, and making sure everything was in place before locking the choir room. It was a habit he had developed over the years. If there was work to be done in church, he did it without waiting to be asked. As he reached for the light switch, a soft voice called from behind him. Daniel,
I've been hoping to speak with
he
you.
turned around.
Yes, I hope I'm not disturbing.
Standing a few
Not at all,
steps
ma'am.
away
Is
was the
everything
new
okay?
lady.
Everything is fine. I just wanted to tell you something.
For a brief moment, he
Everything's
looked over
fine.
his
I just
shoulder
wanted
to
to
see
tell
if
you
someone
something.
else was standing behind him.
You have?
Yes,
There
you help
wasn't.
clean, you never complain.
She was looking directly at him. Daniel smiled politely. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, Daniel. Her voice was calm, almost soothing. Daniel wondered how she knew his name. Then he remembered that he usually led worship during Sunday services. Perhaps she had heard someone mention it. He didn't think much of it. Instead, he assumed she probably needed directions or wanted help finding one of the church leaders.
Daniel,
Is
I've been
there
hoping to
anything I
speak
can
with
help you with?
Me?
He
Yes,
asked
I hope I'm not
respectfully.
disturbing you.
Not at all, ma'am.
She
Is everything
smiled.
okay?
Everything is fine. I
Without
just wanted to
saying a
tell you
word,
something.
she stepped
Daniel,
closer.
I've been hoping to speak with you.
Then she
Me?
gently
Yes,
took
I
his
hope I'm
hand
not
and placed a
disturbing you.
sleek
Not at
black
all,
car
ma'am. Is
key in
everything
his
okay?
palm.
Everything is fine. I just wanted
Daniel
to tell you
frowned.
something. That's why you
He
caught
looked
my
down at the
attention.
key.
You never try to be noticed.
It felt
Thank you,
expensive.
ma'am. I appreciate that.
He looked
Daniel,
back
I
at
have an
her,
offer.
completely
Yes.
confused.
Ma'am?
Before
I
he
just
could
like how you
ask
make
what
the
it was
choir
for,
members scream.
she leaned
So how
slightly
about you
closer
make me
and said
scream too,
quietly,
Daniel?
"Come over to my place tonight." Daniel blinked. Surely he hadn't heard her correctly. "I'm sorry, ma'am." She smiled again, as though she expected that reaction. Then she spoke even more clearly. "Spend just one night with me." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. For a few seconds, he couldn't find a single word to say. His mind raced in every direction. Was this some kind of misunderstanding? A prank? A hidden camera social experiment? None of it made sense. Seeing the confusion written all over his face, she gently closed his fingers around the key. "The Rolls-Royce outside is yours," she said. "And before sunrise, I'll transfer $80 million into your account." Daniel's mouth fell open. He immediately pulled his hand back as though the key had suddenly become too hot to hold. His eyes drifted toward the church entrance. Parked directly outside the gate, illuminated by the warm glow of the streetlights, sat a brand-new black Rolls-Royce. Its polished body reflected the lights like a mirror. A uniformed chauffeur stood beside it, patiently waiting. Daniel looked from the car. Back to the woman. Then back to the car again. Nothing about this felt real. Out of all the young men in the church, why had she chosen him? Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat alone on the edge of his bed, staring at the black Rolls-Royce key resting on his small wooden table. Every few minutes, he picked it up, only to put it back down again. His mother's gentle cough echoed from the next room. It pierced his heart. She had no idea what had happened at church. She had no idea that one decision could erase every debt they had ever carried. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Lord! What am I supposed to do? The room remained silent. The next morning, he forced himself to act as though everything was normal. He helped his mother prepare breakfast. He laughed with his younger sister before she left for school. He even attended Bible study later that afternoon. But no matter what he did, his mind kept returning to the same offer. $80 million. A Rolls-Royce. One night. It sounded impossible. Yet the key in his pocket reminded him it was real. 3 days passed. Then, just after the Sunday service ended, his phone vibrated. An unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Hello. I've been waiting. It was her. Her voice was as calm as ever. I thought you had forgotten me. Daniel remained quiet. I haven't. Then why haven't you called? I've been thinking. She smiled on the other end. I expected that. Another moment of silence followed. Then she spoke again. I'll make it easier. There'll be no pressure. No promises you can't keep. I simply want you to have dinner with me. Dinner? Yes. You don't have to decide anything tonight. Come. Eat. Talk with me. If you still want to leave afterward, I'll personally drive you home. Daniel didn't answer immediately. It sounded harmless. Just dinner. Nothing more. Sensing his hesitation, she added. You've spent days assuming the worst about me. Don't I deserve one chance to explain myself? Those words stayed with him long after the call ended. That evening, Daniel found himself standing outside her mansion. The gates alone were taller than his entire house. 2 security guards opened them without asking his name. It was as though they had been expecting him. A long driveway stretched ahead, lined with fountains, sculptures, and perfectly trimmed gardens. Luxury cars filled the parking area. The Rolls-Royce from church was only one among many. Daniel swallowed. He had never seen wealth like this before. A housekeeper welcomed him inside. The marble floors reflected the crystal chandeliers above. Everything looked perfect. Almost. Too perfect. Not a single servant smiled. Not one. They simply bowed their heads and continued working in complete silence. An uncomfortable feeling settled deep inside Daniel's chest. The billionaire appeared at the top of the grand staircase. She wore a simple white dress. No expensive jewelry. No heavy makeup. She looked almost innocent. I'm glad you came, she said warmly. I almost didn't. She smiled. But you did. Dinner was served in a dining room large enough to fit his entire church choir. Every meal on the table looked like something from a 5-star hotel. Yet strangely, she barely touched her food. Instead, she spent most of the evening watching him eat. As if she wasn't interested in the meal. Only in him. Daniel tried to ignore the feeling. Halfway through dinner, something caught his attention. A portrait hanging at the end of the hallway. It showed the billionaire standing beside an elderly man. The man looked familiar. Very familiar. Daniel couldn't remember where he had seen him. Then it came to him. His picture had appeared in the newspapers years ago. A wealthy businessman. Reported missing. Never found. Daniel looked at another portrait. Another rich man. Also missing. Then another. And another. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Why would she have portraits of people the entire country believed had disappeared? Before he could think any further, a voice came from behind him. You've been looking at them for a long time. Daniel slowly turned around. She was standing only a few feet away. Still smiling. But this time, there was something different about her eyes. Something that made his heart pound. They all accepted my invitation, she said quietly. And tonight. She took one slow step closer. It's your turn. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he could hear it. What do you mean? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The woman smiled. The same thing I meant when I invited you here. You were never invited for dinner. You were invited, because I chose you. Daniel slowly backed away. I don't understand. You will. The lights suddenly flickered. The cheerful atmosphere inside the mansion disappeared in an instant. A cold wind swept through the dining hall even though every window was closed. The servants who had been standing silently around the room lowered their heads at the same time. None of them moved. None of them spoke. It was as though they were waiting for something. The billionaire slowly removed the necklace around her neck. The gentle smile Daniel had seen at church was gone. So many powerful men have walked through these doors, she said calmly. Politicians. Business tycoons. Celebrities. They all wanted more. More money. More power. They accepted my offer without asking questions. She looked directly into Daniel's eyes. But you. You were different. Daniel felt his throat go dry. What are you? For the first time. She laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't evil. It was simply unnatural. You already know. The chandeliers began swinging by themselves. Every candle in the room went out at once. Darkness covered the mansion. Then, a low whisper filled the room. It seemed to come from every direction. Daniel's knees almost gave way. He had never experienced anything like it. Without thinking, he whispered, Jesus. The whispering stopped. Complete silence. The woman frowned. Say that name again. Daniel looked up. His fear was still there. But something inside him was changing. He remembered every sermon he had ever heard. Every Bible study. Every worship song. Every promise that God had never abandoned those who trusted him. His trembling slowly disappeared. He spoke again. Jesus Christ. The room shook. The billionaire staggered backward. For the first time that night, fear appeared on her face. No. Daniel's confidence grew. He began praying aloud. Every word echoed through the mansion. The servants suddenly collapsed to the floor, crying uncontrollably. Some covered their ears. Others began shouting that they wanted to be free. The whispers returned. But this time, they sounded desperate. The billionaire screamed. You don't understand what you're doing. Daniel didn't stop praying. The atmosphere grew heavier. Then, one by one, the portraits hanging on the walls crashed onto the floor. The glass shattered. Hidden compartments behind the portraits burst open. Inside were documents. Passports. identity cards, and evidence connected to dozens of people who had disappeared over the years. The billionaire looked around in panic. Everything she had hidden for years was being exposed. She rushed toward Daniel. Before she could reach him, a loud crash echoed through the mansion. The massive front doors flew open. Security officers and police officers stormed inside. One of the servants had secretly called for help during the chaos after finally finding the courage to escape. Within minutes, the mansion was surrounded. The hidden rooms beneath the house were discovered. Investigators uncovered evidence linking the billionaire to numerous kidnappings, murders, and financial crimes that had remained unsolved for years. The luxurious empire she had carefully built collapsed in a single night. As she was led away in handcuffs, she looked at Daniel one last time. There was no smile anymore. Only regret. Daniel quietly walked out of the mansion. He left the Rolls-Royce behind. He left the promised $80 million behind. As the morning sun rose, he stepped back onto the same road he had walked so many times before. His life hadn't changed because of money. It had changed because he refused to sell his convictions. Weeks later, the story spread across the country. People were amazed that a 19-year-old church boy had walked away from an offer that would have tempted almost anyone. Television stations interviewed investigators. Newspapers covered the shocking downfall of the mysterious billionaire. At church, Daniel never asked to tell his story. He simply returned to the choir. The first Sunday after everything happened, he stood before the congregation exactly where he had always stood. He closed his eyes, lifted the microphone, and sang with even greater gratitude than before. Some victories are measured by the wealth you gain. But the greatest victories are measured by the values you refuse to lose.